today a little bit about diligence, interestingly enough. And this is called The Way of the Bodhisattva by the great 8th century Buddhist master Shantideva. It is a text that we study and we practice in this community. It is one of the great, there are, let's say in Buddhism, thousands and thousands of sutras and teachings and, tens of thousands. But if that proverbial desert island, take this one. This is kind of the whole path in verse. It's profound, it's personal, it's good text. Shantideva, one of the really great Buddhist texts. So we have an intensive group, about 60 people who have been studying and practicing this since last year, and we have worked our way up to chapter 7, which is diligence. Prior chapters were called patience, vigilant introspection, carefulness, taking hold of bodhicitta, which is the mind that seeks awakening in order to benefit people, and generating it, and the excellence of. So now we're in the chapter on diligence. We're just this intensive just began a couple of weeks ago, and we're working now on this 7th chapter. So let me just read a few of the verses, and then we'll talk. I'll read verses 1 through 4. Thus, with patience, I will strive with diligence. For in such diligence, enlightenment is found. If no wind blows, then nothing stirs, and neither is there merit without diligence. Diligence means joy in virtuous ways. Its contraries have been defined as laziness, an inclination for unwholesomeness, defeatism, and self-contempt, a taste for idle pleasure, and a craving for repose and sleep. No qualms about the sorrows of samsara. Laziness is indeed born from these. Snared by the trapper of defiled emotion, enmeshed and taken in the toil of birth, again you've strayed into the maw of death. What is it? Have you still not understood? It's a little taste of Shantideva. He doesn't mince words. So he begins by saying, thus with patience I will strive with diligence. So it's interesting that he begins with, thus with patience. Patience in this context means the understanding really of cause and effect. In Buddhism, patience is not a virtue to be cultivated like patience. Patience comes out of understanding, and understanding in this case means cause and effect. What are we being patient with? With ourselves? Because we understand we are the product of our past. We just didn't spring forth today brand new, even though we'd probably like it that way. We are, and we carry with us, right, the effects of everything we have thought and done and felt, etc. in the past. Okay? So we have to be understanding and patient with that. As well as we have to be understanding and patient with what? The world, everybody else. Everybody else is also the product of their causes and conditions. Okay? So we want to be diligent, and we'll talk about diligent, but with patience. The opposite of patience is what? impatience. And when we are impatient, we are what? Angry, frustrated, which is a kind of anger, irritated. Think about that whole frustrated, irritated, mildly angry, angry, enraged. Why is that? Because we aren't happy with the way things are. We think they should be different. So we get impatient with ourselves. We think I should be different. We get impatient with people around us. We think they should be different. And we think the world should be different. Everybody in it should be different. How different? As different as I want them to be. That's how different, right? So there's behind impatience is a strong ego that wants everything to be the way I want it to be. So thus with patience I will strive with diligence. For in such diligence enlightenment is found. Enlightenment is very much from the time of the Buddha until today, what this practice is ultimately about, right? Well, there's certainly many benefits that come from the practice of meditation and mindfulness and patience, etc. Ultimately, the goal is enlightenment, to be awake, to have real understanding and wisdom, real compassion that is a consistent part of one's being experience. And so, it is only through diligence that we can arrive at that state of awakening. It's not just going to fall into our plate from wishful thinking. There's a series of practices that we have to undertake to achieve that. I mean, you know that, right? I mean, in anything else in life, if we want to become a master of something, we have to what? Practice. Put in our time. Right? Develop all the requisite skills of that craft or that profession or that music instrument or whatever you want to call it, right? So we understand that. Except we just don't understand that in this most essential thing, which is our own transformation, our own awakening, our own eradication of our own self-created suffering, right? That kind of enlightenment will only come about with diligence. That's grounded in patience, which is understanding. If no wind blows, then nothing stirs, and neither is there merit without diligence. So, I think you understand what that means, right? The wind here that makes things move is the wind of diligence, application. Then he says a very interesting thing. Diligence means joy in virtuous ways. So this is important because we may have our own ideas about, what vigilance is. So this is very important that when we hear the word vigilance, which comes from the Sanskrit vidya, which is usually translated as power, right? Energy, virya. But this is a certain kind of energy and power, right? This diligence. The joy in virtuous ways. It is the energy of wanting to do good. That's diligence. That's virya in the Buddhist context. So it's a I think for many of us that's a new concept, so to speak. Because there may be many people in this room who've worked hard in their life, right? There may be many people who right now work hard in their life, right? Work hard at their what? What do we work hard at in our life? Job. We put a lot of energy into working really hard at our job. So we can succeed, we can make money, we can move up You know what I mean? So we work really hard, don't we? Anybody else? Where else might we work hard? School. So we go to school and we're going to work hard so we can, right, achieve and, get the degree and get A's, or, you know what I mean? We work hard, don't we? We're very diligent. Anywhere else we work hard? Family, relationships, we work really hard, taking care of our family, making sure this happens and that happens. We work hard. But I would ask us, do we work joyfully? You see, this is very interesting. People are often, in one of the 7 factors of enlightenment, one of them is called joyful effort. See, we think, we know about effort, we know about hard work, but isn't it kind of like, isn't this serious stuff, you know what I mean? I mean, like, joyful, right? So we might think, oh, joyful means like, oh, everything's wonderful, having a great time. And it doesn't mean that. This is very profound. Diligence means joy in virtuous ways. It means knowing that one is cultivating wholesomeness for oneself and others fills us with happiness. See, it's like big. You see, like, Amy, if you're just kind of in school and you're working hard and you want to do good and, you may succeed, but it may not be a lot of pleasure and joy in that. You see? Because again, a lot of our energy, it's like a lot of people are energized by fear and anger. It's kind of interesting. A lot of people, that's what energizes them, right? Going to get ahead to show everybody I can do it, or to get back at somebody, or to prove something, right? Or we're scared of failure, we gotta, scared of failure, scared of this, scared of, living under the bridge, you know what I mean? So we know the energy, we know kind of those kinds of energy. But the energy of doing good, doing what is wholesome for me and for everyone is not usually where we're coming from consciously. But this is about having that kind of energy constantly. So we can't just skip over this. This is like essential. In Buddhism, effort, energy, enthusiasm is essential. What's going to energize our practice? Right? I mean, a lot of people practice because why? Somebody told them it's good for them. I know it's good for me. It's like a lot of the way a lot of people, work out. It's like, I really don't like it. Right? I know it's good for me. How quick can I get through it? And then they watch TV or they get something else, so they can enjoy it. You see? Because they really don't enjoy exercise. But at least I can enjoy some music or something, or watching TV. You see how we kind of escape from the essential thing of that we can't manufacture our own joy. Joy in having a healthy body, that I'm doing something good for my body. Right? See, that's joyful effort. But to do that, we have to generate it because we don't come by it naturally anymore. Right? So again, when you go to do your exercise or work out, to really reflect, I'm doing good for my body. It will feel better. I'm doing good for my mind. It will feel better after exercise. And if I have a healthy body and my mind feels better, I'll be able to do more things and have energy for more things that I enjoy doing in life. Right? You see, and that begins to build this kind of energy this positive energy about what we're doing, which feels good. Joyful effort feels good. Energizing oneself with anger or fear or, just gonna, oh, that's something, we're great people. We push through, don't we? Right? We're so proud that we can put up with almost anything to achieve our goals. Is that true? Right? I mean, does anybody, or is anybody in a workplace where you're rewarded for your joyful effort? Is that on your evaluation? No, nobody cares about that, do they? They care about what? What? Yeah, your results. Getting the job done. So this is very interesting, right? I mean, there is a result, enlightenment. But the teaching says, right now, the effort should be joyful. The enthusiasm should come from wanting to do good, wanting to be wholesome, to have a wholesome mind, to bring wholesomeness to all your relationships, to, that brings one happiness when one reflects in that way. And so, diligence means joy in virtuous ways, the energy and the enthusiasm of doing something that is wholesome, that is good, that is virtuous. I mean, before we go on, are there any questions about what's been said before? Thus with patience, I will strive with diligence, for in such diligence enlightenment is found. Diligence means joy in wholesome ways. Joyful effort. Any questions, comments about that? Yes. What is your name? Tanya. Yes, Tanya. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. 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 Right. Yeah, so that's... Oh, I'm supposed to repeat it. So Tanya is a physician, and she says, with her patients, she does her best. I'm sure you have boundaries of time and everything else to put a little bit of positive energy that's beyond just the, the medical assessment and et cetera, right? I'm actually in a special place. I spend usually about an hour. Oh, spends an hour with patients. So probably should give out your card when we're done. Yeah. But again, I mean, I don't know you. I don't think I've ever met you. But I would say, but from your point of view, is again, to take joy in what you're doing. You know what I mean? Because even people who do good, like a physician, who's really supposed to be taking care of people, don't often cultivate a joyous mind. And to do that, you'd have to really make sure every day that you're coming from that place where, you want to do good, you want to help people, you want to heal people who are sick, people, when they're sick, a lot of times they're worried or they're anxious, they don't know, they're angry, and so, you know what I mean? So, again, it's from your point of view to always, that the energy behind your doctoring is always joyous effort, right? That's what we're talking about. And then you can bring that, all of us, wherever we are, we will bring that. Because especially, I don't think there's any more joyless place in our society these days than the workplace. Right? I mean, as I said earlier, who talks about joy, being happy in the workplace? Something that's so obvious, because, like we're all human beings. And, a positive mind state is so important. What a wonderful energy. And what a wonderful energy to share with your colleagues and whoever you're working with. But, it's no one thinks about that. I don't know. I mean, is that true? Yeah, I mean, that's just true. If anything, it's like, what are you talking about? Right? But people look at you like there's something weird with you. right? I mean, it's a strange society we live in. The values are quite distorted. So yes. You need a what? A nap. App. Okay, you need a joyful effort app. Okay. Well, if there are any software designers in the audience, perhaps you're onto something. But yeah, I mean, in this practice, we talk a lot about cultivation. We can't expect that, like mindfulness, like concentration, that it's just something because we have a good intention, it's going to all of a sudden be there. It's not. What's always going to be there is what we've done, the way we've thought, acted, spoken in the past. And if 99% of that has not been joyful effort, it's not going to just happen. It has to be very consciously cultivated, right? And things are cultivated by recollection. We have to remind ourselves. It's like we talk with Jenny, we got to, when we sit down to meditate, we got to remind ourselves. You should say, well, didn't I do that when I started my meditation 6 months ago? We forget things in 5 minutes, right? I mean, people told me all the time, I get up in the morning, I do my meditation, I set my intention for the day, I'm going to really be mindful today. And the next thing I know, it's 6 o'clock at night, and I go, oh my God, forgot all about mindfulness. Why is that? Right? Why is it that we can set our intention and immediately forget it? What? Yeah, but it's not. Yeah, it's partly we get caught up in life, but it's also because we have not cultivated it. You see, that's really more what it's about. And so, even though we set of intention, it's sort of like the in Buddhist psychology we talk about our storehouse consciousness and things like that. But it's like it's like that place within our mind that is unconscious, where all our habit energy is arising from. That has a lot of power. Why? Because we've been cultivating it our whole life. It's got a lot of power. And just sitting down and setting an intention will be powerless in the face of our habit energy. Right? When we understand that, then we understand that this kind of constant recollection is what's necessary. Like I said earlier about in our meditation, we can set the intention. I'm going to concentrate. I'm going to be very concentrated, very mindful. If thoughts come up, I'm just going to let them be. If I do get caught up in some story form, I'll let it go. And then 2 minutes later, what? What? Off and running. Right? Why is that? It's because, we've been doing it that way for decades. That's the way our mind is trained, right? So, this cultivation is a process of retraining the mind. Retraining the mind involves, like anything, practice. The more we practice, the more consistent we are in our practice, we will develop that skill more quickly. I mean, there's no mysticism here, right? It's all very simple. The same laws of cause and effect that operate in the rest of the world operate in the Dharma world, in the world of the mind. So are there any questions before we move on to the next about diligence means joy in wholesome, virtuous ways? The enthusiasm, how fortunate I am to find this path, to now really have found the way to transform my mind. I found the way to free myself from suffering. I found the way to be happy. I found the way to really connect with other beings. How fortunate I am. Even if I'm imperfectly practicing, I now know, how to practice. Is that clear? And so we need to reflect in that because there's a joy in that. Right? I often use the example of, if you could imagine, just being, lost in the woods for days. You can't find the path out. You're just lost, right? And when all of a sudden you stumble upon the path, you are what? Immediately you are what? Relieved. You don't have to, you see, it's immediate, right? Oh, I found the path. And all I need to do is what now? Stay on it, right? It's a no-brainer. You see how easy it is? Yeah, now all I gotta do is stay on the path. It will get me out of here. I'm happy. One, because I'm no longer stumbling around lost in the woods, banging into everything. And two, I found the path to take me to where I want to go. That makes me what? Happy. Well, it's just the same way. We have to kind of go, before I really didn't know, I really didn't understand what was going on in this life. I didn't understand why there's human suffering, why I suffer, why people in my family or friends suffer needlessly. But now I understand. And not only do I understand what causes suffering, but now I understand clearly there is a way to the cessation of suffering. There is a way to leading a happy, meaningful, purposeful life. Right? And that makes me what? Happy. I mean, it doesn't mean you're always going around with a big grin on your face. It's a different kind of happiness. It's a kind of inner sense of well-being. Right? How grateful we are that we have the opportunity to do good in this world, to be of help to people. Every day, doesn't matter what we do. I mean, don't think just because you're not in the helping profession that you don't have the opportunity to do good. Right? Whatever we do for a living, we can always have the wish that whatever I do, may it be of benefit to someone. Right? To have that wish. Whatever I do, may it bring benefit to this world, to someone. And unless we are solitary creatures, we are always interacting with people, more or less. Do we really, are we aware that each one of these little intersections with other human beings is an opportunity to bring some value or goodness? Right? And, that makes life kind of meaningful, doesn't it? To know that, to be aware of that. So, you want to invite the bell? I want her to be happy too. You see? So now, this is important. You see, now we're getting, I always consider Shantideva, he's a little like an Old Testament prophet. He puts it to you as well, So after he's talked about diligence and joy and all these wonderful things, he says, now, its contraries have been defined as laziness, an inclination for unwholesomeness, defeatism, self-contempt, a taste for idle pleasure, a craving for repose and sleep, no qualms about the sorrows of samsara. Laziness is indeed born from these. Anything strike home in any of that? Or if you checked off every one. Yeah, so this is important, okay? Because in the same way, we want to know about, joyful effort and enthusiasm and energy and this positive attitude for doing wholesome. We want to know all about that, but we also want to know what we're doing that is the contrary of that, right? Especially if, that's been the way we kind of operated in the world. We want to see is doing what we've always been doing, right, will undermine, will sabotage, will contaminate our capacity to cultivate, diligence and to attain awakening, to become enlightened. So when he talks about laziness, it's more than just, lazing about. As you can see, it's a laziness often of the mind. It's a kind of spiritual laziness. So one of them, he says, is an inclination for the unwholesome. Right? If we're supposed to be cultivating joyful effort or diligence for the wholesome, I guess, unfortunately, I have to look at whether at this point I practice joyful effort for unwholesomeness. Right? And a lot of us get quite happy when we're thinking about things that are really unwholesome for us. Please take a moment to think about those things that you do. I do. That in your kind of bigger picture mind, this behavior, this food, this activity, this is really, it's really not that wholesome for me, right? And yet, I get so happy when I do it or even think about doing it. Okay? An inclination for the unwholesome. Again, most of us don't really think about that life in that way, perhaps. That there is a wholesome mind states, emotions, ways of thinking, and there are unwholesome ones. There are wholesome ways of speaking, and there are unwholesome things. There are wholesome ways of using our body, and they are unwholesome activities of our body. There are wholesome things to consume, and there are unwholesome things to consume. Everybody know what I'm talking about, okay? And we need to assess whether I am as enthusiastic for the wholesome as I am for the unwholesome. And nobody's going to make you speak out loud, but it's probably good to just reflect when we hear these words. Use them like a mirror. Do I have an inclination a lot in my life for the unwholesome? Defeatism and self-contempt are also considered laziness. And many people have this kind of, I can't do this. Other people can do it, but I can't do this. This is too much for me. Or, I'm too screwed up. I'm too wounded. I'm too lazy. You know what I mean? I'm too comfortable. I'm too I mean, we will endlessly rationalize why we're not doing something that's intrinsically good for us. Right? That's called defeatism. Right? The Buddha teaches everybody's not only has the Buddha nature and has the capacity for inherently, have an awakened mind already, but all of us have the capacity to achieve it. In the Buddha's lifetime, among his disciples, he had one guy who was a mass murderer, right? Who became an arhat when he gave up his ways and joined the sangha. There was a illiterate, untouchable sweeper. Couldn't remember a word of Dharma, and yet the Buddha gave him a practice, and he achieved awakening. He was a sweeper. So, this is the teaching of Buddhism, right to this day. Everybody has the capacity to awake. Everybody has the capacity to liberate themselves. Right? So, to not believe it and to believe you're incapable of it is he's calling defeatism. You've already given up before you even began. Or you began, but but I can't do this. Too much for me. Okay? Self-contempt, which is an interesting, that's unfortunately not an uncommon ego stance of many people in our society. People don't like themselves. Some people hate themselves for this, for that. They have self-contempt, which leads to what? Defeatism. I'm too bad. Right? I'm no good. I'm disgusting. I'm broken. All that way of thinking about oneself leads to sabotaging one's enthusiasm for transformation because one's always decided I can't do it. I'm some kind of contemptible object outside the pale of. So we have to really look at, I think this is psychologically very sound, what he's saying, that we need to look not only at our, inclination for the unwholesome, but really what are these ideas we have about ourselves that may be defeating us, preventing us from really making, movement along the path. Does everybody understand this? Again, this is like what do they say? You're trying to do something, but one hand's tied behind your back. You know what I mean? It's like you can't do it because you can't grab anything because you only have one hand. You only have use of one hand. And many of us, see, if our hands were tied behind the back, we could see that. But this psychological stuff can't be seen by others. But for us, they may be as real as if our hands were tied behind our back. See, we see it. So this is important to understand that Shantideva is asking us to look deeply at this. A taste for idle pleasure. Now, Shantideva lived in the 8th century. Can you imagine how he'd be if he came to our world? Right? Got on the internet, looked at the 250 channels on cable TV, look what's available on Netflix, right? Little did he know about the world of idle pleasure, right? We live in a culture that has elevated idle pleasure to an art. And, these days, I think most people in our world, that's what they think life's about, right? You go to work, and when you come home, what? You have these idle pleasures. Inconsequential. More or less meaningless. And we have to keep doing it day after day, right? A taste for idle pleasure. A craving for repose and sleep. It's sort of like what it was like we're so attached to being comfortable. Right? I want to be comfortable. Now again, everybody, we know there are lots of health benefits for getting a good night's sleep, right? But sometimes you talk to people and say, I just don't, I don't have time for meditation. Well, why don't you just get up a half hour earlier? I mean, meditation's good for you. That's why you want to do it, right? You think it may bring you lots of benefits into your life, your day, etc. Right? Or get off the couch. Get away from the computer. I mean, I think if we added up all the time we spend on our phones and our texting and email and surfing and communicating and texting, well, I mean, there are people who've done lots of studies. I mean, what is it? Like people check their stuff 1,000 times a day? I mean, it's just incredible, the numbers. The amount of time that people just spend. Especially if it could be something else that could be much more beneficial to us. A craving for repose and sleep. Again, I'm not, not saying a good night's sleep doesn't have lots of benefits. It obviously does. But anyhow. And then finally he says, a taste for idle pleasure, a craving for repose and sleep, no qualms about the sorrows of samsara. Okay? So samsara is a Sanskrit word. It's very predominant in Buddhism. It means it is the world of birth and death. It is this world of ours. This world of endless change, ups and downs, back and forth. It is the world in which our life unfolds, and for many people it is a life of unsatisfactoriness. It is a realm of fundamentally unsatisfactoriness. It is the world of attachment and aversion. It is the world of up and down. It is the world of success and failure. It is the world of like and dislike. It is the world of pleasure and pain. It's this endless world that we endlessly ping-pong around in. And not only do we ping-pong around in it, but so many in the world ping-pong, right? To read the newspaper, well, we don't read newspapers anymore. I'm dating myself. To read the news online, right? What is the news primarily chronicling about our world? Yes, suffering. Right? It's an endless chronicle of suffering. And remember, all those editors are probably looking at thousands of things that are suffering in the world, and they're picking out the ones that they think will be most whatever. Okay. No qualms about the sorrows of samsara, about our own, about our families, our friends. No qualms about the suffering of the world. In this Bodhisattva path, it is because we see so much suffering in the world that people create for one another that motivates us to want to wake up, to find the path out, so we can show others the path out. So to be indifferent, to have no qualms about this sorrowful world of ours, also can lead to a kind of laziness. Laziness again meaning no enthusiasm for the practice. So, to be present to the suffering of the world and not turn our back on it, to know what its causes are, and again, want to be of help to the suffering people of this world, many of whom don't know better, motivates us to follow a path of awakening, a path of transformation and healing. But to be indifferent to that, right? To have no qualms about that. So what? At least I have a comfortable life, right? He says this can create a kind of spiritual laziness. Yeah, so I'll take a few questions. Thus with patience, I'll just read them again, these 3 verses. Thus with patience I will strive with diligence, for in such diligence enlightenment is found. If no wind blows, then nothing stirs, and neither is there merit without diligence. Diligence means joys in virtuous ways. Its contraries have been defined as laziness, an inclination for unwholesomeness, defeatism, and self-contempt, a taste for idle pleasure and a craving for repose and sleep. No qualms about the sorrows of samsara. Laziness indeed is born from these. Any questions or comments? I mean, how does this strike you? Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So again, that's not exactly what he's talking about, but I'm very happy to address what you said. So again, he's saying, again, not me, Shantideva, no qualms about the sorrows of samsara. So again, it sort of means that we're indifferent to the sorrows of ourself or the sorrows of the world. He says if we're indifferent, then that does not increase an energy for transformation. But so let's take your case. You are suffering, right? And you know you're suffering. And you would like not to suffer anymore. Yeah. So, good. I think that's healthy to acknowledge suffering in ourselves and in others and want to help. It's the same. Whether you want to help yourself or you want to help anybody else, it's the same energy, right? You want to do good. What is your name? What? Gina. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay. So Gina, you know, so in this enthusiasm for doing good and wholesome, you acknowledge that Gina is suffering because perhaps her grief around something has gone on too long, right? She seems to have fallen into a hole of despair or grief. You want to help her, right? So that's good, right? Now, what does she need to hear from you? Yes. How can you help her? Gina. Hold on. Okay. Let's, for a minute, just kind of treat Gina like a third. Let's treat Gina like she's a good friend of yours or a family member, somebody you love, who came to you, Gina, and said, I've just, this thing happened or this loss or whatever, and I was grieving, and it's like become a hole that I can't get out of. It's gone on too long, and it's really, kind of destroying me, right? Gina, can you help me? Yeah, what would you say to her? Uh-huh. Yeah. Okay. All right, I hope Gina was listening. See, I think there's another issue here for you, Gina, is why is it that you know better that you don't take your own advice? I think this is really significant for many of us. Many of us know better. We hear a voice inside ourselves telling us, what to do. And it's a good voice. I mean, it doesn't mean that we don't have other voices inside us that are giving us bad advice. But if we're at least somewhat conscious, we kind of, know. And oftentimes when people say, well, I don't know, just doing what you just did makes it so obvious. Like let's say it wasn't you. What if somebody else was going through this? How would you respond to them? What would you say to them? And immediately Gina goes, oh, bump, a bump, a bump, a. It's like a piece of cake, right? Now, why is it, Gina, that you don't listen to her? Yeah, I'm good, but that's a good step. But you see what I'm saying? I mean, for you to ask yourself, I know better. If anybody else was suffering like it and I cared about them, this is what I'd say to them. And yet, 5 minutes ago, Gina, you said, I don't know what to do. You know what to do, Gina, right? That's the truth. You know what to do. And the question is, it's that old physician, heal thyself, I mean, are you willing to listen and trust that intelligent, wise voice within yourself, right? And do what she says. Because it is the wholesome way for you. And it will bring you back, not like that, but it will bring you back to where you were. Because you see the pit you've fallen into. You know it's a pit. I mean, when you fall into a dark hole, what do? What? Yeah, get out. I mean, right? I mean, why fall into a dark hole pit and go, I don't know, maybe I'll live here from now on. I mean, right? We laugh because it's so ridiculous. And yet, psychologically, we get ourselves into these strange places. Rather than just, I'm in a dark pit, rather than exploring the dark pit, interpreting the dark pit, get out of it. It's not a wholesome place to hang out, is it? Unless you're a miner, I guess, or anything, something beneficial down there. But for most of us, it's just a dark pit, right? So you know better, Gina, right? And sometimes, yeah, you gotta, sometimes we're just too self-indulgent with ourselves. I mean, I like what you just said. If it was somebody else, the first thing you'd say to them, you give them a little kick in the pants and say, come on now, you got to mobilize your energies to get out of here. Sometimes we have to talk that way to ourselves, just to kind of mobilize some energy. People might go, ooh, isn't that a little harsh? Well, anybody ever raised children? It's nice to be sweet and loving to them, but sometimes you got to kind of raise your voice and kind of go, stop. Am I right? Is that an abusive parent? No. You're doing it because you want to help the child, because they don't know better. And they need sometimes that kind of energy, right? And sometimes we need that kind of energy, right? Okay, Gina? Stop. Pull her out.